Hi all, I have a very interesting notable game for you today, and it's actually from the World Cup, just played yesterday in fact. Pavel Eljanov was playing against Hikaru Nakamura. Eljanov has had a storming tournament so far in the World Cup. He won his first 6 games. Absolutely brilliant tournament. So a force to be reckoned with. Now, Eljanov played white and played d4. Nakamura played d5, and we have a very solid second move, knight f3. It's the second most popular move in the position to c4. Knight f6, c4, e6. Nakamura is playing solid classical chess here. We have Catalan territory, g3. There's an Avruk set of books which boosted the popularity of the Catalan, I believe. Everyone was raving about them. For myself, I didn't get much time to read them, but I'm assured that they're actually very, very good if you want to take up the Catalan. I think Boris Avruk. Yep, I can see it on my bookshelf. Boris Avruk. I've got volume 1. Right, bishop g2, castles. Now black takes on c4. Queen c2, a6. And here often queen takes c4 is played, but this is the second most popular move according to live book. a4, clamping down on b5 to protect the pawn. Bishop d7, trying to sort out this bishop issue. Maybe sometimes going there. Queen takes c4, and in fact it goes there. This is the main move. Bishop g5, bishop d5, queen drops back to c2, and yeah, black invites some sort of well, black wants to keep harassing the queen, maybe even for a quick draw. Maybe it was black, that would be brilliant. But no, queen c1, this is the main move. Keeps the tension, keeps the pressure, restraining black's c5. The queen's quite useful there, eyeing that pawn. h6. And here, this is more popular actually, just taking on f6, then bishop f4, more than twice as popular. Bishop takes f6, bishop takes, rook d1. Okay, it seems, you know, black's pretty solid here, and plays actually a5. Now we have knight bd2, and 6 games in live book have bishop takes f3 in this position, and there's nothing with what was played, which is actually bishop h7. Just to give you an idea, bishop takes f3, knight takes, this sort of thing. Seems pretty solid for black. Black gets that b4 square, which has been weakened earlier, and it should be okay. It should be pretty robust and solid, this position for black. It doesn't seem as though there's too much exciting going on, or too much for black to worry about. But in the game, yeah, we see this bishop h7. Okay, now in this structure with the bishop on h7, it's a light square bishop. In that structure, yeah, black's got the pawns on light squares. Here, it seems the bishop, okay, it's got that diagonal, but has it got too many? It hasn't got too many rather exploitable targets. Knight b3. Also, this knight is actually quite a nuisance to go to e5, so maybe it was an idea to take that off, a better idea perhaps. So c6. Queen c3. Now white's got that idea now of knight e5 supported by the queen on c3. The knight on e5 makes black's position look a little bit on the uncomfortable side here, and in fact black seems to be discouraged in fact to play knight bd7 in this position. He actually played bishop e7. And then we have knight c5. This is why it seems very uncomfortable with both of these knights going into these dark squares, c5 and e5 potentially. So hitting b7, that's protected. And now this other one comes to e5. So it looks as though, yes, this bishop has cost black something here, that these knights are nicely perched, happy parrots in the position on c5 and e5 here, preventing an actual knight bd7. And leaving black with a rather more awkward choice, knight a6, knight on the rim is dim, as they say. In this position, though, there's something very interesting about it. Can you guess what white plays here? If I give you 5 seconds, you might want to pause the video. Okay, yeah, that knight which wasn't taken off is actually part of this little combination now. Knight takes b7. There's that pressure on c6. There's 3 pieces coordinating against c6. Queen takes b7. Bishop takes c6. The idea is getting 2 pawns and a rook with 2 minor pieces. Possibly technically best here is the move queen a7. So that after taking there's bishop b4. Like this, and it's still pleasant enough for white though, this position. It might represent a small improvement to the game. Now in the game queen c7, after bishop takes a8, we have the queens coming off. Now maybe Nakamura thought this position is fine, but let's have an evaluation here. Okay, black controls at the moment the b1 square. However, this b file can be controlled via b2 potentially one day if a rook gets to b2. The knight at the moment is out of the game. This bishop is actually kind of blockable if white ever constructs a pawn chain like this. It can be shut out of the position, in fact. It is interesting, but what about this backward pawn, you might ask? And okay, let's see what happens now. Knight c6. So where is this bishop going? It doesn't really want to drop a5 either, so it just goes to d8. So that's snapped off, so we get further simplification here. And the same sort of repeat evaluation now. The bishop can be potentially blotted out of the game. The knight's not that useful, and white can try and get the b file. If not with b1, maybe the b2 square later. If he can get the b file, he can get access laterally to targets like a5. So he starts actually by blotting out the bishop with f3. Rook c8. Rook a3 for the moment, protecting that pawn. Bishop g6. King f2. The king comes into the game as well. Very useful as an attacking piece, potentially, the king in the endgames. Stopping an entry now into b2, rook d2, f6. Now, very, very interesting after f6, this next move. If white's going to make progress, he needs to try and take control of this b file. He can't do it by b1. That needs b2. Slight snag though. He can do this, but Nakamura can come into b3, right? Weakness of the last move. Yes, it represents a pawn sack just to get the b file, to get this lateral pressure for a target, say a5. Well, a5 is the most important target to create a passed pawn. Rook ab2, it's just sacrificing c3, but now rook b5. It's going to get his pawn back with interest. He's going to create a passed a pawn. Bishop c2, the bishop comes in there. Rook takes a5. The knight's hit, goes back. Now rook a7. And now white's going to be playing e4 soon as well. Here, f5 was played maybe to try and discourage e4. Let's see. It weakens some dark squares potentially, and these might be useful in the end game scenario with the king maybe walking on them potentially later. But if black doesn't play f5, it's a structural concession for sure. Say king f7. This kind of scenario, a5 here, a6. This kind of scenario is interesting, where the black king is trying to do something about here, but you see there's another problem, that the rooks can come over here in these scenarios and harass these pawns if the king ever neglects the king side. Now I say this because there's also a question. This scenario helps maybe understand something about this position. After f5, a5, it seems a mysterious decision. The king goes to h7, not to try and do something about the pawn. Yeah, these pawns, if they're left behind, maybe they're subject to attack later. So the king stays with them. The thing is now, rook b7. Black's pieces are slightly tied up here because of this passed a pawn. Rook c4. Rook b6. So a6 is on the cards. Bishop a4. Trying to arrange a defensive blockade. a6. Bishop c6. Now a7. So at the moment, yeah, both pieces are protecting it against any sacrifice. Bishop d5. And yeah, you can see the advantage of f5 stopping e4 here. So the bishop's perched now on d5 securely. The minor downside, well, it seems maybe minor at the time, the slight weakening of the dark square, e5. Rook a2, another interesting move. This time, this pawn sacrifice to gain access to the c-file for lateral access to pressure points on the c-file. So it's actually offering the d4 pawn, which is taken, so discovering an attack on the rook. But he gets now rook c2, so another clever way. He's making his rooks have great careers in this game, shall we say. Sacking the c3 pawn to get the b file, now sacking the d pawn to get the c file. I mean, that's pretty instructive. If you remember anything from this game, in a few months it will be maybe this, controlling files with rooks. It's an interesting scenario, the rook against the knight and bishop, and then the pair of rooks. So this pawn sacrifice to get rook c2 is making the knight stumble back immediately. Otherwise it's a total disaster. What can black do here? If he plays this, I don't think that's good. Takes here, forking both minor pieces. So yeah, the rook, the pawn sack now is making the knight go to a terrible place. a8. Knight on the rim is dim, but the knight in the corner is extra dim. Rook a6, so the knight, poor knight. Okay, Nakamura's knight is not a picture of health, but does it represent a lost position overall? Rook d1. Then we have this move h4. Black's not really doing anything now with that knight there, stranded. The white rooks are pressurizing, of course, and if white can fix down these pawns, then maybe he can start doing something with his king. h5, and in fact he starts doing something with his king now after this h5, which further weakens g5, so the king has got these squares to walk on. There's a classic Alekhine game where Alekhine was playing against someone that weakened dark squares and the king eventually marched in. Here we see king e3, so it's a bit Alekhine-esque, marching in on the dark squares now. Rook g1. Might have been against Book, a player called Book. I'm not entirely sure. I need to check that. So king f4, but the king is marching now on these weakened dark squares. Rook g2. And then we have rook d6. And potentially, with rook d6, threatening that forcing move, we can imagine rook c8, rook takes d5, rook takes a8, chain reaction. Rook g1, rook c8. So rook takes d5 is on the cards. Black plays rook a1. It might be the case that this is it's much better for white to just take on d5 here and do this. For example, I mean, this wasn't played. Actually, king g5 was played, which is more about king safety. Very interesting, king g5, taking away some escapes from the black king. But before we pass this moment, let's have a quick look at rook takes d5. So in this position, it's good for white. It's potentially, I think it's it might be winning for white because the king's so active, and you know, white can perhaps just play e3 and fix that pawn and take it. It looks winning. So yeah, this isn't a great position already, if that's possible. But king g5 spells out rook d to d6, rook d6 to d8 rather, rook h8 will be checkmate because the king is controlling the exit of the black king. Yeah, and it's giving up the a7 pawn as well. This is, I mean, that doesn't matter to give up that pass pawn. So the pass pawn actually had this effect of decentralizing black's pieces, especially the poor knight. And now this mating net is woven. Black plays g6. And here, actually, there's a very, very clinical finish. which white misses, which is actually a forced mate in 5. Can you see a forced mate in 5? It is very Alekhine-esque. If I give you 5 seconds, what would you play here with white? There's a forced mate in 5. You might want to analyse and come back. Okay, you can take away kind of exit root of G7 with King F6, so threatening Rook H8, and if King H8, check, and here white has the killer move, Rook CG8, threatening Rook takes G6, checkmate, and there's nothing black can do. These pieces are not doing anything for black's king safety. Yeah, they've given way. If takes, yeah, his mate next move, Rook takes G6. So yeah, it's just such a winning position though by this stage. Check, check. The slower route is played. Rook takes G6, threatening Rook H7. White now gets a passed H pawn, and I think the black pieces have just run a marathon to stop the A pawn. I think they're exhausted. They're fed up. This knight has gone 6 million miles to get over here. It really, the last thing it wants to do is run another marathon to stop the H pawn on the other side of the board. But it tries, it starts, stumbles to B6, King G5, making way for the H pawn now. Knight C4, yes, it's making its way. Is it going to go to E5 later? H5. It doesn't actually go to E5 in this position. It goes to D6, trying to be useful there. And we have check. And now after Rook D7, there's all sorts of pins and stuff going on. Black actually resigns here. One of the principal threats, if black doesn't do anything, is H6, H7, and Rook F8 mating. And the knight, yeah, it's exhausted from its marathon to blockade the pawn. If it goes to E8 here, in this position, well, for example, check, and then Rook takes D5, looks pretty good. There's a pin here on the Rook. So yeah, black didn't bother in this position. H6 and H7. If you want, I'll just for 100% accuracy, let's just check this position. Knight E8. Yeah, not Rook takes, because then there's Knight takes F6 and black's actually equal. No, throwing the check first to use that pin now with Rook takes D5, and that is over. But yeah, what does black actually do in this position? So Knight E8's ruled out. Rook 8 just drops the knight at minimum. If black doesn't do anything, okay, what's the move which doesn't actually do anything? So say here, I think we just play H6, and we've got, you know, H7 check, as mentioned, Rook F8. Yeah, yeah. I know Nakamura is one of my favourite super grandmasters, and it was a bit of a concern. Pavel Eljanov, his winning streak in this tournament, he's actually on the live rating list now, climbed to rank 15 in the world, about 2750. So he is a major force to be reckoned with. It means now Nakamura needs to win, because this is still within rounds 1 to 6. He needs to actually win the next classical game to stay in this knockout. It's brutal. If he doesn't win, and it's today, the day of this video, 24th September 2015, he will be knocked out of the World Cup 2015. He needs to win. That is a that is a massive task, basically. So anyway, congratulations to Pavel Eljanov. That's a fantastic game, showing it's a wonderful example of Rook against Knight and Bishop, and how you can sacrifice pawns to get control of files. So sacrificing C3 to get that B file, and then later sacrificing D4 to pulverize that knight on A8, and then switching the attack on this side, getting the king really aggressive on the weakened dark squares, creating another pass pawn asking that knight too much to run another marathon to come and chase this pawn. It's too much. And the pawn's got a bonus. It's not just queening, it's like mating the black king. A superb game, the more you look at it. It's a game well worth analysing in depth. Okay, comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.